Right, so I'm going to start off, as I'm setting the scene, I'm going to start off with the definitions of telecare and telehealth. Telecare, as far as I'm concerned, is principally about environmental monitoring. Fire, falls and fits is a very, very simple and very trite example, but it's what happens outside the body. It's typically an emergency response, and there's typically low interactivity in that somebody has telecare in their house, and if they don't have a fire, they don't have a fall, they don't tend to have much interaction with their service. Telehealth is the other way around. Telehealth requires people, currently anyway, requires people to input their vital signs on a regular basis, to respond to questionnaires. Whereas in telecare, if you've got smoke in the house, then there's probably a problem. With telehealth, the alerts are a little bit more subjective, and so currently the equipment only supports decisions, it doesn't take them. So it requires a certain amount of clinical knowledge to respond. So as I say, high interactivity, and because there is that interactivity, there's an opportunity to encourage self-care. So when you input your blood pressure, for example, if your blood pressure has been on the high side, there's an opportunity for the machine then to react back to you and say, can I suggest a few ways in which you can help to reduce your blood pressure, or gently nudge you into a different style of living. And both of these can help people to feel more cared for, to help people to remain in the community, and to reduce, therefore, the cost of care. I won the whole system demonstrator for the London Borough of Newham. One of the 3 sites, Kent, of course, was one of the others. And what happened was we found that telehealth and indeed telecare were being treated essentially like drugs. It was being asked to prove itself in a double-blind, randomized control trial. Now, obviously, you can't do it quite like that with telecare and telehealth, because there is no concept of a placebo with telehealth and telecare. But the point was it was being seen as a single intervention, and nothing else was being changed. Now, if you see that really as a way of changing the way care is delivered, it's an oxymoron. You can't see it in that way. I was, for example, very involved with a project in Norfolk where, at the request of McKinsey's, who were doing a significant change program there, we were implementing telehealth. And nobody said, has there been a randomized control trial of McKinsey's? But everybody said, has there been a randomized control trial of telehealth? And as far as I'm concerned, what we were doing was exactly the same thing, because we were changing a whole range of things in Norfolk. It wasn't just introducing a single piece of kit. And one of the things you have to be particularly wary of is that when you do a randomized control trial, you also have to make sure that you've got usual care sorted. And usual care in the case of Newham was irrespective of cost. And we exposed an enormous amount of unmet need. So whilst we ended up by comparing 2 things that were very high, and the people that were not part of the trial at all came much, much lower down in terms of the quality of treatment they received. Just to give you one statistic, the whole system demonstrator, I'm told, is showing a 20% reduction in emergency admissions. When we changed the whole system in the island of Bute, admittedly with a much smaller number of people, we saw a 91% reduction in admissions. So you can see a very significant change when you treat it like that. So what does it work for? COPD is the thing it's been used for most of all so far, and there's some the Bute trial I'm mentioning was one of the ones that was particularly successful. Heart failure, depression, anxiety, hypertension, obesity, urinary tract infections, and some claims are made also for diabetes, particularly where it's a comorbidity. Particularly for things like heart failure, it works much better if you get good risk stratification. So you can identify who you should be giving the treatment to. And that's why we've got the next presentation that follows on from this. We'll be talking about the risk stratification activities in Surrey. And then later on, Sarah in particular will be talking about the integration with social care, which is an equally important requirement. So what does telehealth actually do? Well, one of the things it will do is it will enable you easily, regularly, to monitor people's health and well-being in some detail if you require it. I remember one consultant saying to me once, he said, we've never had this level of detail, to be able to get somebody's blood pressure on a daily basis, to be able to get someone's pulse oximetry on a daily basis. When Sharon talks to you later, she'll be explaining how you can expand the reach of your services. She will be telling you, I think, how she managed to treat twice as many patients when she had telehealth as before she had telehealth. Telehealth can also encourage, as I mentioned earlier, can encourage self-care. So you can put messages back on the screen telling people how they might consider changing their lifestyle. You can record the information and you can go back to it in some detail. You can do various things on medication adherence. Through questionnaires, you can measure someone's state of mind. When we first introduced telehealth in Newham, the first 50 patients, 20 of them turned out to have undiagnosed depression. Now, if you've been reading some of the things that have been coming out of the King's Fund recently, you'll see that people who have depression, who have a long-term condition, the average cost of treating them is 45% higher than if they don't have depression. So obviously, if you know someone's got depression and you can treat that depression, you can reduce the cost of treatment. It also enables you to do genuine continuing care. So much primary care ends up as being episodic. Something happens to me, I go into the doctor changed my medication, and I come back and that's it. But the thing about telehealth is it's monitoring you daily, essentially forever, so it's genuinely continuing care. And I think a really important point to make is, as a result of this, it's very, very good at supporting the virtual ward movement in Surrey. Something else that I've noticed is that people feel much happier when they are being looked after more intensely. And finally, to re-emphasise the point, it enables you to focus care round the patient. So what does it result in? Well, one thing it means is that you can anticipate exacerbations. So you can start making treatment and you can avoid people going into hospital. You can spread your care over more people. You can reduce the number of people going into hospital in an unplanned way. You can reduce the risk of people remaining in the community. You can reduce the amount of depression and anxiety from your patients. And because you've got all this data, on an anonymous basis, you can start looking at it and you can start analysing it. And in time, people will find more longer-term relationships from this, so they can anticipate with greater clarity when people are likely to be going into hospital. So the end result of that is that patients are happier. I've seen them on many occasions. They are healthier, they're better informed, they feel in control of their condition. And certainly for people with COPD, that seems to make an enormous difference. They spend much less time in hospital, and equally they don't spend so much time travelling to appointments too. And something that I've only been made aware of recently, and that is if somebody is beginning to get a little bit of dementia, and you take them off to hospital, they get more confused, and when they come back again, they have not reverted back to the state they were in. So somebody who is a little bit demented, or indeed more profoundly demented, the more they go into hospital, the more it exacerbates their condition. So it's particularly important for those people if you can treat them in their own homes in familiar surroundings. Clinical staff are better equipped to cope with the greater burden of older people requiring care. And of course, the end result of this is that the NHS actually saves a considerable amount of money. So I'm not going to go through these, but the point is that the QIP objectives for Surrey are, as far as I'm concerned, almost a total match for telehealth. So just trying to sort of wind up now, I want to make the point that the kit is not enough. You do need a champion because you do need to make some quite significant changes in the way care is delivered. You do need risk stratification. You do need to consider lots of other things. For example, in Butte, in order to achieve that 91% reduction, we also introduced pulmonary rehab. We also did a medication usage review. We also brought in, Butte is an island, we also brought in a specialist respiratory nurse, virtually, that was using telehealth. She didn't actually have to be there, she could just look at the signals. And we reorganised the way care was delivered. So we did lots of other things too. You also need some means of monitoring the output from it. You need a model of care that involves telehealth and a model of care treating people in virtual wards at home. And you need, call it a care pathway or call it a pathway whereby you deliver care. You need that too. And so the equipment requirements at the end of the day are actually rather less concerning than everything else you need to do. The equipment obviously needs to be user-friendly, it needs to be reliable, supported, you need to be able to upgrade it remotely because things are changing so quickly, it needs to be flexible, and it needs to be cheap. And actually the kit itself is changing. When I was doing the work in Newham, we had great big boxes that people tended to switch off in the summertime because it heated their rooms up too much. And still, there is a requirement for most people to lock their kit down so that it's not, it can't be used for anything else other than telehealth. But as time goes by, increasingly people are starting to look at lower risk apps on mobile phones. And I'm sure that's the way of the future. And in olden days too, we used to have a standard pulse oximeter, for example. Now people have worked out ways of using a mobile phone to get some sort of measure of the oxygen content of your blood. And I was shown the other day an application of Philips, where you just sit in front of the machine and it can measure both your respiration rate and your heart rate by tiny changes in the colour of your skin. Most impressive. And of course, what that mobile phone does is, because it's with you all the time, it can give those little hints and tips to encourage you to change to a more healthy lifestyle. At the other end, the server end, the equipment currently is very much decision support. It will raise an alert, it will tell you there's an issue, but it typically won't solve the problem for you. But increasingly, that decision support is going to become decision taking. So everything's going to change. So now moving just on to my final slide then, which I'm addressing mainly at the clinicians in the audience here. That in order to access some of that funding, I would argue that what you would need is please to participate in the upcoming tender, and I've asked people if they can stay behind after this meeting. We can have a short meeting to discuss that. It helps if you have a champion. You will, of course, need a business case and a model of care and some sort of pathway, and needless to say, you will of course require a certain amount of training and documentation. And that's why I'm here, and a number of my colleagues are here to help with that. So what's going to happen next, I think, is that Adrian is going to be talking to you about risk stratification. And then that's going to be followed by perspectives from a range of stakeholders, clinicians, and indeed one patient. And then Sarah and Ernie are going to be talking about the social care side of things before Sharon wraps it up at the end of the morning by talking about the experience in Kent and elsewhere. And then Stephen Johnson will be telling you this afternoon, who's head of long-term conditions in the NHS, will be telling you the national perspective following the whole system demonstrator results. Thank you very much.